Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been listening to this debate, which you've had now for a few hours. And through you, Mr. Speaker, to the good chair of the Appropriations Committee, I would like to ask a few questions.
Proceed.
Through you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, the taxes that the hospitals have to pay, which is a part of what has happened from the past. Through you, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, is there any change in the taxes that we are imposing on the hospitals? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
No. Is there? Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the good gentleman from Glastonbury, no, there is not.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to hear that. The hospitals are obviously relieved to hear that in the last minute that there is no new taxes that have that will or could impact them. Through you, Mr. Speaker, the money that the hospitals are owed by the state because of taking care of our patients, through you, Mr. Speaker, are those monies that we owe to these hospitals, are we current with them, and have all these monies been paid? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, for the current 16-year budget, I do not know.
Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, what I do know, unfortunately, is that we have not paid them, the hospitals, what we owe them. Obviously, I understand the crisis we are in. There's no question about that at all. We are in a financial stress. And though the speakers before us have talked about how wonderful a state we are, how wonderful we are compared to the rest of the nation, I was glad to hear all that. But unfortunately, harsh reality is what we are facing today, and harsh reality is what the hospitals are facing. Through you, Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of discussion in committees. And if you remember, Mr. Speaker, we had a wonderful press conference in a bipartisan way, where we had the hospital CEOs, it was a beautiful gathering of all of us, representatives from both sides of the aisle. And we made it very clear in one voice, as a single voice, we said that we know what you do for us. You know what us, meaning not you and me directly, but indirectly for what the services the hospitals provide to our patients, to our constituents, to the entire state. And for taking care of us, there's a certain amount, obviously, money that we owe them. And when that does not happen, there was a lot of discussion that in lieu of taxes that the hospitals owe us, we would instead of the taxes, we would say the reimbursements we owe you, the taxes you owe us, we will come up with some agreement and come up with a game plan so that we are fair to our hospitals for what they do for us. And we had agreed upon the fact that we need to do something for the hospitals. It was a bipartisan, beautiful afternoon for all of us down in the LOB. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I know that we are cutting here $831 million. I'm well aware of that. But through you, Mr. Speaker, is in this budget, I haven't seen it, but I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. Through you, Mr. Speaker, is there an avenue where for the taxes that the hospitals owe us, the state, and the monies we owe them for the services they have rendered, that can they be exchanged one for the other, dollar for dollar? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the good gentleman from Glastonbury, no, there is no vehicle in here. What we did look at that, and the fiscal note for that would have been astronomical for us to have to replenish in this time. As you pointed out, it's $861 million that we had to cut out of the budget to try and make the $960 that we had in the deficiency. So with all of those things that we have to cover right now, we were not able to do that. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Srinivasan.
So through you, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, there is no room, there's no vehicle where the money that we owe the hospital, in lieu of that, the hospital taxes would replace them. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, no.
Representative Srinivasan.
So through you, Mr. Speaker, in this budget that we have, we will continue to tax the hospitals like we have done in the past. There are no new taxes. I heard the good chairwoman say that. I'm thankful for that. But we will continue the taxes that we've already kind of acted upon in the past, and there's no change in that. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you to the good gentleman from Glastonbury, no, there is nothing like that in this budget. Through you.
Representative Srinivasan.
So through you, Mr. Speaker, as I hear that clearly, the taxes remain the same, but our commitment to the hospitals in what we owe them, that is not addressed in this budget. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, could he repeat, the good gentleman from Glastonbury repeat that, please?
Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I definitely will. Through you, Mr. Speaker, there are no new taxes. There's no change in taxes. There's no reduction in the taxes as far as the hospitals are concerned. I'm thankful there are no new taxes, but there's no reduction in the taxes at all, given the huge amount that we have to deal with. So what the hospitals owe us in terms of taxes to the state, that remains unchanged. It'll continue as it has, status quo. But what we as a state also owe to the hospitals for the payments, that component is not addressed at all in this budget. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, we are now waiting for a response from CMS on the availability or our ability to do that. So through you, Mr. Speaker, we are waiting for a report.
Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, maybe if the good chairwoman could expand on that, what report are we talking about, and how would a report from CMS telling us what to do suddenly give us money in our coffers to be able to pay that bill? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, it's a state plan amendment in order for us to adjust those taxes. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, having discussed the hospitals and where we are in this day and age, in this budget, through you, Mr. Speaker, I did hear the good chairwoman say that the Citizen Election Fund has not been reduced by any amount, or did I not hear that clearly? In this budget, through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, no, it has not.
Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, so what is the amount in the Citizen Election Fund going forward in this election cycle that the state will be handing out to people who qualify? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walker.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, as we've been talking about, it's $11 million in the Citizens Election Fund.
Representative Srinivasan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the clerk is in possession of LCO 6497. Mr. Speaker, I asked that this be called and I be granted leave of the chamber to summarize.
Thanks. Clerk is in possession of LCO number 6497, which should be designated House Amendment Schedule D. Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 6497, designated House Amendment Schedule D, and offered by Representative Claridis Candelora et al.
Gentlemen, as I leave the chamber to summarize the objection, hearing none. Representative Srinivasan.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, what this amendment does is addresses the question that I just asked of our good chair of appropriations. What it does is looks at education on the one hand and the Citizen Election Fund on the other. As we all know, we all stand here, sit here, have a conversation, are able to communicate with each other because of the education that each and every one of us have had. I've had a wonderful education back in India, have got a great education in this country, and it is this education that has brought me, like it has brought you and everybody else, into the chamber. It is this education that when we were looking to buy a home in Connecticut, when we moved, we decided to move to Glastonbury because Glastonbury touts of a wonderful, wonderful education system. My two kids, my son and my daughter, have gone through the public school system. They're young adults, professionals in Boston. And I have 4 grandchildren. So as far as public education is concerned in Connecticut, public education is concerned in Glastonbury, Mr. Speaker, I have done my due duty. My kids have got educated. I live in town, paid my taxes, and my kids have educated, and I'm moving on. But that's not right, Mr. Speaker. Glastonbury has to continue to do good. Glastonbury is not about me, it's not about my family, it's not about my kids, it's about all of Glastonbury residents. It's about everybody in Glastonbury for years and years to come, for generations to come, as it is in our state. We value education. It is of prime importance to us. And for us to see this education budget, after the towns, after the municipalities have already come up with a budget, to suddenly be slashed by an X amount or a Y amount and impact education negatively, I think, Mr. Speaker, is unacceptable. I speak on behalf of Glastonbury, and I speak on behalf of all other towns, each and every one of them, that are negatively impacted because we have decided to leave the money in the Citizen Fund alone. Leave it that way, untouched. It has not been reduced, as we heard the good chairwoman say. The money remains the same, so that you and I and all of us who apply for the Citizen Fund, as we heard the good Representative Carney talk so eloquently about that one extra bumper sticker, one extra mailer, and as he said very well, a negative mailer on top. That is not what we want. That is not what our residents want. That is not my children of Glastonbury want. They want education. Every child needs the proper education. So through you, Mr. Speaker, to summarize what this amendment does, is puts back the money into the education system, into the ECS funding. And the amount that's been put back is what is there in the Citizen Election Fund. So that is one component of this amendment. And the other part that the amendment does is the money that we have, the $1 million that we have for the $1 million that we have that goes into the Community Investment Act, that which is being swept out is being put back into the general fund. So through you, Mr. Speaker, I request that this be adopted, and when the vote be taken, it be taken by roll. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.